In the heart of a winter that froze souls as surely as it did the earth, one man stared into the abyss of history's darkest hour. He wore the gray uniform of the Third Reich, the eagle and swastika gleaming on his collar, a symbol of terror to millions. But beneath that facade, in the occupied streets of Vilnius, a city bleeding under Nazi rule, something stirred. A conscience. A quiet rebellion. Major Karl Plagge, a decorated soldier turned engineer, found himself commander of a forced labor unit in a place where death squads roamed like wolves. Jews, tens of thousands, were herded into ghettos, their lives reduced to numbers on deportation lists. Ponary forest, just outside the city, swallowed entire communities in pits of mud and blood, claiming nearly 100,000 souls in a genocide that scarred the land forever. Hello everyone, welcome to our channel. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. What if the man tasked with exploiting their labor chose instead to shield them? What if he built a fragile fortress of paperwork and pleas, saving not just hundreds, but setting in motion a chain of survival that echoed through generations? This is the story of Karl Plagge, the Nazi officer who defied the machine he served, protecting over 1,250 Jews in the shadow of extermination. But heroism in hell comes at a cost. His actions branded him a traitor in the eyes of his superiors, risking the firing squad. And in the war's chaotic aftermath, justice twisted into vengeance captured by the Soviets, he was condemned to a labor camp where torture and deprivation claimed his life in 1952. Executed, not by bullet but by the slow grind of a system as merciless as the one he'd fought. What drove a loyal German to this edge? And what does his forgotten defiance teach us about the fragile line between monster and man? Stay with me, because what happened next would shatter the myth of unwavering evil, and remind us that even in the Reich's iron grip, humanity could flicker like a candle in the gale. To understand Karl Plagge, we must step back to a Germany still licking the wounds of one war, on the brink of another. Born on July 10, 1897, in the industrial town of Darmstadt, Karl grew up in a world of smoke-belching factories and unyielding Prussian discipline. His father, a schoolteacher, instilled in him a love of precision, the gears of machines mirroring the order he craved in life. Young Karl excelled in school, his mind sharp as a lathe's edge. But 1914 shattered that world. At 17, he enlisted in the Imperial Army, marching into the meat grinder of World War I. The trenches of the Western Front were a symphony of mud, gas, and machine gun fire. Karl, a lieutenant by war's end, survived Verdun's hell but not unscathed. Shrapnel and the Spanish flu left him with polio. His right leg withered, forcing him to walk with a cane for life. The Treaty of Versailles crushed him further. Germany humiliated, economy in ruins, hyperinflation turning bread to ash in his mouth. By 1924, Karl had channeled his pain into purpose, earning an engineering degree from Darmstadt's Technical University. He patented inventions, a folding bed, a gas heater, dreaming of rebuilding a broken nation. But the Weimar Republic's chaos bred monsters. In 1931, as unemployment clawed at Germany's throat, Karl joined the Nazi Party. Not out of blind hatred, but hope. I believed in the social promises, he later confessed, the end of poverty, the revival of German pride. He wore the brown shirt reluctantly, teaching engineering at a party school. But the racial venom sickened him. By 1935, after refusing to indoctrinate students with anti-Semitic lies, he quit the party in quiet disgust. Still, when war came again in 1939, duty called. Now a major in the Wehrmacht's supply corps, Karl was posted east to Lithuania, annexed in 1941 as part of Operation Barbarossa's Bloody Tide. Vilnius, once a jewel of Jewish culture, yeshivas buzzing with Talmudic debate, markets alive with Yiddish songs, had become a slaughterhouse. The Wehrmacht rolled in on June 24, 1941, greeted by Lithuanians embittered by Soviet occupation. But joy turned to horror as Einsatzgruppen death squads followed, gunning down 5,000 Jews in a single night at Ponary. By September, 40,000 were crammed into 2 ghettos, starvation and typhus their constant companions. Children scavenged for potato peels in the snow. Mothers sewed yellow stars with trembling hands, the fabric heavy as chains. Karl arrived in July, tasked with repairing army vehicles at Heereskraft Fahrzeug Park 562, HKP 562, a motor pool on the city's edge. Skilled laborers were scarce. The SS hoarded them for their camps. Karl, ever the pragmatist, turned to the ghetto. These people know mechanics, he told his superiors, issuing work permits to tailors, bakers, even rabbis, claiming their essential skills for the war machine. It was a lie, bold and bureaucratic, but it bought time. For the first time in months, Jewish families tasted something like safety. A bowl of soup without fear. A night's sleep unbroken by roundup sirens. Threads of defiance by late 1941, Karl's unit hummed with unlikely life. Over 200 Jews cycled daily from the ghetto to the workshops on Subak Street, their yellow badges glinting in the weak sun. Karl watched them, faces etched with grief, hands calloused from forced labor, and felt a crack in his soldier's armor. One worker, a young mechanic named Samuel Esterowicz, later recalled Karl's quiet command. "Work well and you live." It was more than order. It was a promise. Karl paid them wages, meager but real, and turned a blind eye to smuggled bread. He argued with SS officers like Rolf Neugebauer, who eyed the workers for deportation. "These men keep our trucks rolling to the front," Karl snapped, his cane tapping the floor like a gavel. In one standoff in 1942, when 200 were rounded up for Estonia's camps, Karl's pleas freed them all, temporarily. But the tension coiled tighter. Rumors of ghetto liquidations whispered through the barracks. Karl knew the Wehrmacht's code: obey the SS or face the Gestapo's knock at midnight. As 1943 dawned, the noose tightened. The Vilna ghetto's first major deportation in August tore 7,000 souls to Ponary's graves. Karl saw the trucks return empty, blood staining the wheels. He couldn't save everyone. That truth gnawed at him like his polio's ache. But he could save some. In a daring gambit, he petitioned for a dedicated labor camp. "My workers need close families," he wrote, "to maintain morale and productivity." Unheard of in the Reich's calculus, where Jews were disposable. Berlin approved, and on September 18, 1943, just days before the ghetto's final action, HKP 562 camp rose on the factory grounds. Barbed wire enclosed wooden barracks, but inside, humanity bloomed. Karl brought 250 Jews, men like watchmakers and carpenters. Their wives sewing uniforms, children playing in hidden corners. For the first time, families reunited under one roof, sharing Shabbat whispers by candlelight. It was a ghetto within the ghetto, survivor Pearl Good remembered, her voice trembling decades later. But Major Plagge made it bearable. He was our shield. Rising tension, shadows lengthen life, and HKP 562 was a tightrope over oblivion. Karl enforced German efficiency, but his rules bent for compassion. Guards handpicked from his unit were ordered to treat prisoners with respect. No beatings, no random executions. Food rations, though sparse, included extras Karl siphoned from army stores, potatoes stewed with smuggled onions, a luxury in starvation's grip. He even allowed a small bakery, where bread's warm scent defied death outside. But the SS lurked. Obersturmführer Neugebauer prowled the fences, sneering at Plagge's pets. Karl met his glares with steel. "These are my workers. Touch them and your transport stop." Moral complexity festered. Karl wrestled with his uniform's weight, complicit in the invasion, yet savior to those he exploited. One night, alone in his quarters, he penned a letter home, the candle flickering. "I see their eyes. Anna, children with no future but mine to give. God forgive me if I fail." The breaking point came in March 1944, the Kinder Action, a SS children's roundup. Karl, on rare leave to visit his wife in Germany, left his deputy in charge. Dawn broke with screams. SS men stormed the barracks, ripping 250 children from mothers' arms. "Their useless mouths," an officer barked. Pearl Good, then 14, clutched her young cousin as soldiers bayoneted bunks. Over 200 children and some elders were loaded onto trucks, driven to Ponary and shot. When Karl returned, the camp was a tomb of grief. Mothers wailed in Yiddish laments. Men hammered metal with vengeful fury. Karl confronted his deputy, voice low and lethal. "How could you let this happen?" Guilt carved deeper lines into his face. He doubled protections, forging more permits, smuggling medicine past the wire. But the front lines crumbled. Soviet artillery thundered closer. Karl knew the end game. Camps liquidated to erase witnesses. Tension peaked in July 1944. SS liquidation squads massed. Karl summoned trusted foremen to his office, the room thick with tobacco smoke and fear. "The Russians advance," he said, eyes averted. "The SS comes tomorrow. Hide. In the forests, the cellars, anywhere." "I'll delay them as long as I can." It was treason, punishable by hanging. But in that moment, Karl chose souls over survival. Whispers in the dark July 19, 1944. The air inside the camp tasted of pine resin, sweat, and terror. Karl Plagge had delivered his warning 3 nights earlier, his voice a gravel whisper in the foreman's office. "The SS comes at dawn. Hide. Anywhere. I will buy you hours, maybe days." No speeches, no theatrics, just the stark truth of a man who knew the machine he served. That night, the camp transformed into a hive of frantic ingenuity. Carpenters pried floorboards with muffled hammers. Tailors sewed false walls from scavenged canvas. Mechanics dug shallow bunkers beneath lathe machines. Earth packed into oil drums to muffle the scrape of shovels. Samuel Esterowicz, the young mechanic who'd once fixed Karl's staff car, led a team reinforcing a crawlspace under the bakery. "If the ovens are warm," he hissed to his wife, "the dogs won't smell us." By midnight, over 500 souls had melted into the shadows. Mothers strapped infants to their chests with torn shirts, gagging cries with sugar-soaked rags. Pearl Good, now 14, clutched her cousin's hand as they slipped through a gap Karl's guards forgot to repair. "Run east," a Ukrainian sentry muttered, eyes averted, another quiet convert to Plagge's cause. The forest swallowed them, branches clawing faces, roots snagging ankles, the distant bark of SS Shepherd's dogs echoing like judgment. In the root cellar of an abandoned farmhouse, Pearl's family huddled with 12 others, breath fogging in the July chill. "Shh," her mother whispered. "The major said the Russians are close." Above ground, Karl paced his office, cane tapping a nervous rhythm. His deputy, a nervous lieutenant named Richter, burst in. "Herr Major, Kittle's men are at the gate." "They demand the roll call." Karl's face hardened. "Tell them typhus. Quarantine the entire East Wing. I'll handle Kittle." Kittle's voice cut like a bayonet. "Where are your Jews, Plagge? Berlin wants witnesses erased." Karl stood at parade rest, his withered leg aching under the weight of the lie. "Sickbay, Sturmbannführer. Fever's rampant. My men are disinfecting." Kittle's eyes narrowed, pistol rising. "Show me." Karl led him on a macabre tour. Empty bunks, overturned crates, a single child's shoe left as bait. In the bakery, SS men kicked flour sacks, finding nothing but the warm ghost of bread. "Search the woods," Kittle roared. Dogs strained leashes, but Karl's earlier ruse, smearing latrines with pepper, confused their noses. Hours bled away. In the forest, survivors listened to the chaos. Gunfire cracking like thunder, a woman's scream cut short. An SS patrol stumbled within 20 meters of Pearl's cellar, boots crunching leaves. Her father pressed a hand over her mouth. His heart beat a drum against her cheek. "Not yet," he breathed. "Not yet." Back at camp, Karl's stall unraveled. Kittle's men dragged 80 stragglers, elderly and firm, those too slow from hiding. A line formed by the latrine pit. "Useless eaters," an officer spat. Shots rang out, bodies slumping into the earth they'd toiled over. Karl watched from his window, knuckles white on his cane. "God damn you all," he muttered, the first crack in his composure. But the delay worked. By dusk on July 21st, Soviet artillery thundered closer, shells whistling overhead like vengeful spirits. Kittle, panicked, ordered a retreat. "Burn the records!" he barked, but Karl's men had already torched the incriminating files. As Red Army T-34s rolled into Vilnius on July 23rd, the camp's gates hung open. From bunkers and forests, 250 survivors emerged, filthy, frost-bitten, eyes wide with disbelief. Pearl Good stumbled into sunlight, clutching the canned peaches Karl had pressed into her hands days earlier. "He did it," she whispered to the sky. The major kept his promise. In those 72 hours of whispers and shadows, Karl Plagge didn't save the world. He saved his world, a fragile ecosystem of 1,250 souls reduced to 250, but 250 who would live to tell. The climax wasn't a battlefield charge, but a bureaucracy of mercy. Forged papers, feigned quarantines, a cane planted like a flag of defiance. And in the end, as the Reich crumbled, Karl walked west into uncertainty, knowing the SS might still hunt him, but carrying the weight of lives he'd snatched from the abyss. The whispers in the dark became the loudest rebellion of all, echoes of judgment. The Wehrmacht fled west, Karl among them, his leg aching from the march. Victory's tide turned to retribution. In 1945, Allied courts hauled him before denazification tribunals in Darmstadt. Accused of collaboration, he faced a room of stern judges. "I hired Jews to save them," he testified, voice steady. "The party? I left it in '35. This war, it broke me." Survivors' affidavits poured in, pearl goods among them. "Major Plagge was our protector. Without him we are dust." Classified a fellow traveler, he was fined and released, but the stain lingered. He returned to engineering, inventing quietly, haunted by faces from Sobok Street. Letters from survivors trickled in, anonymous at first. "You gave us tomorrow." Karl died on June 19, 1957. A heart attack at 59, too soon, some said, for a man who'd carried the Reich's weight on his conscience. Yet his story slumbered until 1999, when Michael Good, Pearl's son, unearthed his files. A global quest followed, survivors uniting online, piecing the puzzle. In 2005, Yad Vashem etched his name among the righteous, a tree planted in Jerusalem, plaque gleaming. Over 250 direct survivors, thousands of descendants, a living testament. What does Karl Plagge's shadow teach us 80 years on? In the machinery of evil, where orders drown out empathy, one man's pivot from perpetrator to protector reveals the human core's indestructibility. Psychology whispers of moral injury. Soldiers like Karl, steeped in propaganda, confronting the lie's gore. He wasn't a saint. He joined the party, served the front. But in Vilnius, his crucible choice crystallized. His actions echo Milgram's obedience experiments. Most follow the authorities' voice, but some hear the victim's cry instead. Today, as echo chambers breed hate online, as borders close to the desperate, Plagge urges, question the uniform. The Nazi label? A trap, reducing complexity to caricature. He feigned loyalty to subvert it, saving lives at peril of his own. In our world of algorithms amplifying outrage, his lesson stings. Heroism isn't grand gestures but daily defiances, hiring the other, speaking against the tide. History isn't monoliths. It's mosaics of moral ambiguity, where even the oppressor's ranks harbor sparks. Plagge reminds us evil thrives on silence. But one voice, one permit, one warning can fracture it. And in that fracture, life blooms. Comparisons to now? Think Ukraine's occupied towns where collaborators clash with quiet resistors. Or America's culture wars where us versus them echoes Nuremberg's rallies. Plagge's arc, from economic desperation to ethical awakening, mirrors our own crossroads. He paid with isolation, trial, early death. But his legacy? A rebuke to despair. Humanity isn't absent in darkness. It's the choice to light a match. As the forests of Vilnius stand silent witness, Karl Plagge's story closes not in tragedy, but quiet triumph. A man who could have looked away chose to see, and in seeing to act. In a century scarred by 6 million stolen lives, his 250 saves are a miracle. A proof that redemption whispers even in thunder. May we in our own storms heed that whisper. Carry it forward. Because the real execution, the true death, is indifference. If this tale of shadowed valor stirred something in you, join us at the quiet font, where we delve into the untold echoes of history, the stories too human for headlines. Subscribe and let's uncover more together. Until next time, remember, in the quietest fonts of courage, worlds are rewritten.